Hello and good morning from the couch. I made a video. This is going to be video 910. It's going to replace video 910 that I recorded yesterday. That's currently in YouTube limbo. Apparently, I used a keyword that triggered the censor. So I probably could say everything I said yesterday and not use that one word and it would be okay. And it wasn't an offensive word. And obviously I can't tell you what it is because then this video would also be banned. But uh so what's going on, folks? Um a lot of stuff's going on right now. And just across the river from where I live in Kentucky, I live in Indiana at exit 0. Okay, so I'm like right there at, you know. Um, there's a lot of anti-LGBT stuff going on right now everywhere, it seems. Um, and it's what I've learned this week is that um, people have some very strong opinions, very strong, and um, I think there's something deep in our psyche. There's something deep, 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 deep. I mean, I thought our pockets were connected to our well-being, but really, this really is deep, 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 deep. Talking about money. Um, people can talk, 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 but when they actually put their own money on something, then yeah, they really do care about it. Um, but anyway, obviously, if in a system where you have people being oppressed, the people that are oppressed are going to be very emotionally involved, obviously, because they're being oppressed. And you have the oppressors who, some of them are probably very much involved, very emotionally, for whatever drives them. They're very, 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 very involved. And then you probably have people kind of in the middle on both sides. Um, a person might vote Republican because they're fiscally conservative and they probably don't know or don't care, ignorant. And being ignorant is not a bad thing, it just means you don't know. Uh, and if they knew that, kind of unfortunately in America, everything kind of gets wrapped together in two packages, Republican or Democrat. And then you have another group of people who are kind of the same way, but on the oppressed side, who are like, well, I'm friends with somebody, or, gee, I don't necessarily think that's right. And probably a lot of I'm assuming you're transgender watching this, a lot of our friends, people that we work with, are kind of in that group. They know us, they know that something's going on that's making us upset, and they just don't necessarily know what to do. Um, and on Facebook, if you're like me, um, maybe you've posted something about please call your senator, please call your representative, please help me out. And they're like, oh, yeah, yeah, I will. And then they don't. Um, it's like the kid that comes to your door asking you to give them $1 so they can play soccer, buy this expensive candy bar for my school's flag football team. They may pass on it, but here's this person asking for help. And so, you know, if you're the one being oppressed, it's everything to you. You just don't understand. You don't understand why one group of people feels that they have ownership of you. And I made mention of this yesterday, and I hope maybe this wasn't the word that got me in trouble. The 14th or the 13th, I think it's the 14th Amendment, is against slavery. And I'm waiting for that connection to be made here. Um, you know, but for whatever reason, like I said, I'm emotionally, I'm definitely in the oppressed camp. My state of Indiana has already, I mean, they're a Republican stronghold. They're not gonna. Um, so kind of what I was trying to say in my video yesterday was that the worst thing I think when someone's in a bad situation is to give some sort of platitude. That sounds kind of cliche. Well, tomorrow is a brighter day. It can't rain all the time. Cheer up. Blah 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 blah. That's probably when someone's in a very bad situation, that's stressful. That's probably it's nice and you mean well. You're trying to help, but it kind of doesn't acknowledge the shittiness of the situation, and that's why usually I'll say, "Well, this is shit," or "That's shitty." That's shitty of them. I'm sorry you're feeling that way. How can I help? That's the second part of that. How can I help you? Obviously, your friend, you don't want to see your other friend suffer. Follow it up with an how can I help you? What can I do to help you out? And I think that's probably where a lot of this is falling short. And there's a lot of historical context for that. If you happen to read Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s "Where Do We Go From Here" speech, and some of his other speech, or the book, but it's a collection of his speeches, writings, that were done really shortly before he was assassinated. So it was like the "I Have a Dream" speech is over here, and several years later he wrote these essays that were combined into this one book. And in over here, he talks about the things that he has learned since he was over here, a span of time. And if you haven't read it, one of the things he talks about is how his friends were very quick to join yeah, I believe in you, I'm with you, but they didn't show up. They didn't follow through. They didn't, when it actually came time to do the work, they weren't there. And I think some of us, we don't see our friends. We don't see people. A friend of mine, Miss Brenda, said something about, I don't understand why my friends and people around me, they're not rallying to support me. They're not, my team lead in my last job at Humana, she put up a transgender flag in her cube, put a transgender flag in her email signature. She went that extra step. And I think that is the thing that's missing to a degree. And I'm not too sure, we've gotten so used to a like on Facebook or a heart on Facebook, or a care on Facebook, which is wonderful. I mean, that's a wonderful start. But in these times, we need that pick up the phone and call your representative. And I mean, in the state of Kentucky right now, not only are there numbers you can call, there's also a website you can go to, and with a couple of clicks, send a message to the the state legislature. So but but it is infuriating, and it's infuriating that, you know, um, I found out that, where I work, um, what can I say? How can I say this? Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola. I lived in Atlanta for a number of years, which is the world headquarters of Coca-Cola. The world of Coca-Cola is also in Atlanta. But I mean, the building where I went to school at Georgia Tech is right there. You look out your window and you see the Coca-Cola logo on a building. That's their world headquarters, Coca-Cola. Um, a company, a big company, and definitely Coca-Cola is a big company all around the world. Okay. Any company has to look at, and we're going to distance ourselves just a little bit from the other discussion we were having. They have to weigh, I have to do it this way. I was going to do it this way, but I can't because of the way I'm sitting. They have to weigh pros and cons. So a company, you know, at the moment can do pride stuff at pride time and be acceptable. But, unfortunately for you and me, transgender rights right now is a sticky, icky subject. And so at pride time, yeah, Coca-Cola is going to have a float. Coca-Cola is going to have pride, whatever song in the background, and, whatever the current, pop artist, the Coke, and, we're gay, yeah, but Coke. But they have to weigh how much their sales are going to be impacted. And so that's kind of why they don't take a stand. They're not going to take a stand. Even though they might have a office that specifically is about inclusion. And so it's very frustrating, you know. I mean, it's common sense to me, you know, I shouldn't support bigotry and discrimination, but the company doesn't see it that way, and so um, it really breaks my heart that a big company like Coca-Cola, despite being apparently gay friendly, um, is not going to take a stand against people that talk about, anti-transgender, anti-gay stuff, and they're very clever that they might say something like, well, they're not targeting you specifically, are they? Well, no, but they're saying transgender people, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but everyone's entitled to their opinion, aren't they? Okay. So from a business decision, again, it's if you're the oppressed, you're like, can't you see this is wrong? Can't you see blah, 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 blah? Uh, so I guess what I've learned lately is the most you can hope for is to raise awareness, maybe, but there are people that are very, very opinionated for whatever reason. Some of them just don't understand it. Some of them, there's a religious element in there that I don't understand. Some people have a just you know our political systems require scapegoats. Um, And I can only say I've seen it with Republicans, but I imagine there's got to be scapegoats in the Democratic world. But, you know, if you're a politician and you can't provide a solution, you can't provide anything to say, look at what I've done for you, you can always fall back on it's their fault. You know, at least you're better off than they are. And so there's a mechanism there in this institution to keep another group of people down as the scapegoats. And if you look back at American history and probably world history, uh, California, the Chinese or the Irish, there was a thing when they were building the railroad, the Intercontinental Railroad, and they could get Irish workers cheap, and so other American workers were blaming the Irish workers for taking away their jobs. I mean, it's not a new thing by any stretch of the imagination. Um, it just so happens at the moment that we are transgender people are the other, and we're very easy to abuse. Um, we're a minority. We don't quite have enough people. Um, if you're part of a union and a company and you strike and you have enough people, you cause an effect. Um, if you're the lone Spartacus, if you're one person out of a million, company's not going to miss you if they can fire you or find a way to fire you. So, our situation right now is literally pushing a huge ass boulder up a hill. And we're little people. We're not very, you know what I mean? Um, and we're getting there. And I guess maybe I'll end on this, which I think is a bit of positive. Not to make light of the situation. It fucking, I mean, it sucks. This is shit. I mean, this is shit. Um, but I have seen support. There are people out there that are not transgender who firmly believe that transgender people have human rights. That transgender I used to say trans, and I'm kind of learning now the best thing you can do is say transgender person, because when you make a concatenation, it's convenient. But that's kind of what the Nazis did against the Jewish people. They were like, oh, the Jews. They dehumanize them. Where I was going with that. But there are people, very strong voices that are not within the transgender community, who are very much in favor of, in support of, and to see that, to know that we're not alone, that is nice. I mean, it's better than nothing. And for everyone you see, how many out there that you don't see? That's kind of like a friend of mine, Miss Dawn, posted a graphic on her Facebook page about the number of Kentuckians, and it was something like 70 some odd percent um, are against a transgender bill. So kind of like we've seen with abortion in Kansas and whatnot. If you leave it up to the people of a state, a democratic vote, um, these really fringe ideas, taking away people's rights, are going to fail. That's kind of where a democracy trumps a republic. And we really are more of a republic than a democracy. We elect people to represent us, And one person, out of an area of 400,000 people, they elect one person to represent them. That one person can't represent everybody, so they have to pick and choose. And in an ideal democracy, that person would poll their members and say, "Well, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this?" And then the majority of that view, they would go to Washington and say, "Well, my constituents believe," bleh. And unfortunately, again, you elect someone in, and they go to Washington and they vote their own views, which may not represent, you know. Anyway, I'm going to shut this off here because this is my fun time, and I really need some fun time. Um, I like to think that, and I could be fooling myself, I like to think that I have two of my cats next to me, and it's really nice to have cats just giving you some loving. Because I need some companionship. I need some loving right now. Kitty loving. What was I going with that? Darn it. There it goes. Pew. Well, I don't want to waste your time. Not that I haven't for 22 minutes. But anyway, yeah, hang in there, hang in there. Oh, I like to think that's where I was going. Oh, okay. And I've made mention of this in my other videos. The Alamo. There are people that don't like the way the world is being so open-minded, and I do think this is kind of where the Republican Party sort of attracts, because the Republican is the conservative, okay, party. They're sort of a haven for this idea of, looking back. We need God in our skulls. We need prayer. We need God. We need Jesus. Um, they attract, this is like a shelter for that mentality. And for generations, women were dominated by men. White people dominated over black people, still have going on. And so anything that's not progress, I mean, these are people who probably, if they could, they'd have a beeper instead of a cell phone, and I don't know what else. You know, regular gasoline in their car. I mean, just they're not backwards, but just in the past, and they're not really interested in progress, unless it benefits them. And so again, I think this is just one of those. This is the fight. This is they've hunkered down. This is their last stand. This is their Alamo. This is where they focus their attention. And unfortunately, they have very deep pockets. They have friends in high places. They have really big megaphones. And so it seems like they are dominating, you know what I mean? But in reality, they're going to be overrun eventually just by progress, and natural attrition. People that die. You might have a really, I can only think of like Dick Cheney, for example, who has a gay. I think one of his children is a lesbian. Okay. Ted Cruz has a bisexual daughter. There's cracks in the Alamo. It's going to fall down eventually. You can only stick your head in the sand so long. You know, so this is my prediction. A lot of states are going to pass a lot of anti-LGBTQ and anti-transgender rules that probably in the next 12 years are going to get repealed. You know what I mean? It is going to be a wave of just anti-transgender everything from a political point of view, because they're in power and this is their last stand. It's like if you built your political platform on hatred and othering people and fear mongering, this is your last stand. And so you go double down on the fear mongering, and you double down on the hate, and you double down on the oppression, because you're gathering the last resources you can. This is like a tsunami wave sucking in the water that's for like a big boom coming at you, and then it's going to dissipate, and they're not going to be able to do this anymore. You know, this is their last hurrah. This is the finale of the fireworks show, and there ain't no more fireworks. So it's going to be explosive. It's going to be traumatic. It's going to be shitty. But then there ain't no more. And it's going to be voters like my daughter. The more and more that the Republican Party oppresses these people, when these people can vote and they say, you know what, you've been bullying me, you've been bullying my friends. No, I'm not going to support you. So 12 years. 12 years. That's kind of my idea. It's going to suck, but it's going to be over in 12 years. So I hope I'm wrong. I'm hoping it'll be over in 2 years. But like I said, these people have very deep pockets, and a politician, there's a line from Hunt for Red October where the movie, I believe, I don't think it's in the book, but the press secretary or the chief, not chief, anyway, in the White House, the White House, I can't think of his name. Really the power broker inside the White House, maybe the head of the State Department. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. But he says something to Jack Ryan when he pulls him aside, and after all the naval people are like, "You're crazy, you're crazy." He doesn't want to defect anyway, and he says something to him. He says, "Look, I'm a politician, and when I'm not kissing babies, I'm stealing their candy." He says, "I keep my options open. What do you know? Tell me what you think." And so, if a politician wants to stay in power, and much like Coca-Cola, there's going to come a point when, if they don't make the jump to being transgender inclusive, they're history. And politician wants to stay in power. So, look at Joe Biden, for example, as an Irish Catholic who was against abortion, and to a degree against gay marriage. But it got to the point where it's like, well, either we can hope through education and, gee, it's wrong to oppress people, we can hope. But even if that wasn't the case, the saying, you don't have to be a weatherman to know which way the wind is blowing. If you want to stay in power, you've got to adjust. And so, like I said, I think give it 12 years. All right, on that note, bye.